Right, we're going to get into our first topic now. Would a Labour government be good for Britain? 0207 862 2222 is the number, so get your calls coming in now. A new poll has found that Labour would win by a landslide if an election was imminent. Some 11,000 people were polled, with the results, as you can see, showing that Labour would win 461 seats, while the Tories would just secure 90. It's a massive blow for Rishi Sunak, who's currently holidaying with his family in California, but it could be seen as good news for Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, often accused of being dull and uninspiring. Kevin, I'll come to you first. Do you think it's time we saw a Labour in government to lead us?
Yeah, maybe Rishi Sunak should stay in his second home in California and cavort with Minnie and Mickey Mouse. When he comes back, he's not going to get anywhere. Look, I think it's time for a change. That's the national mood. It's really against the Tories because if they haven't fixed a problem after 13 years, they ain't going to fix it. They're blamed for a lot of things that go wrong. I mean, for instance, people's spending power, if you work, is just the same as it was in 2008. The economy's still smaller than it was before COVID. So that's why there is this mood. And I think Labour just philosophically, ideologically would be better because it cares about public services. But people are sick of the Tories. That's what it's all about. Keir Starmer hasn't sealed the deal. I don't think there'll be a huge majority like that. He's got to paint in vivid primary colours why he would be better and practically what he would do for people. He hasn't done that yet. But people are just fed up with the back teeth with the Conservatives.
Esther, do you think people are fed up, as Kevin says, with the Tories, or do you think actually this has been a really difficult political climate and, you know, situationally we've had obviously the war, or having the war in Ukraine, we've come out of the pandemic. It's going to be a difficult time, whatever party's in power.
Absolutely, but I think it's both. I think people are sick of the Tories. The last 18 months have been a very grotesque display of what the Tories are capable of with all the infighting. But I also think there are mitigating factors that I think people will be more understanding of. Ultimately, I think you're right, they're not going to win by as significant a margin. And I don't think it's impossible to see a scenario where the Tories do have a reduced majority, but they still do clinch on to a majority. And the reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, people can see what's happening in other countries. People can see that, you know, interest rate hikes, inflation, all of that, they're not unique to the UK. Now, there are problems that are unique to the UK, like, you know, persistently high energy prices, which has been the case since, you know, the 2010s, and other issues, you know, like inflation and all of that, which are persistently higher in the UK than, say, France and Germany and, you know, other countries in the EU. But the reality is that people will ultimately decide based on who is going to make my life less difficult. And that's where Labour has an issue, because yes, they are benefiting from this wave of, you know, anti-Tory sentiment, but you know, that's not enough to seal the deal. I mean, if the Tories can seem slightly more competent closer to the election, or they can just seem like they're trying to make people's lives less hard, I think the Labour really could lose. And an example of this is the ULEZ, you know, debacle that's going on right now. You know, it may seem like a small issue because obviously the Tories still only won that Uxbridge seats by about 500 votes. But if people get the feeling that, you know, Labour are going to usher in all these covert taxes in the name of green this and, you know, global warming that, people are going to feel like, actually, you're probably just going to make my life just as hard as the Tories are. So
what do you think the Conservative Party need to focus on then, if the aim is to seem as they are making people's lives less hard?
Well, there are three priorities at the moment that I think is on everyone's minds. Obviously, the economy, the cost of living crisis, and law and order. Now, I notice in, you know, Labour Party's vague 5 missions, they kind of skirt around it. They touch on it a little bit, but really, you know, they have issues like breaking down barriers to opportunity at every stage, which is fine. It's important. And, you know, making Britain a clean energy superpower. They're not really hitting the bullseye like Rishi Sunak is trying to, by saying, you know, tackle inflation, grow the economy, national debt, which we need to talk about, productivity, NHS, the small boats. I think the angle is slightly skewed. So the reality is, if you ask me right now who is hitting more of the issues that are concerning the core electorate, I think the Tories are doing a slightly better job. But again, we haven't seen the Labour's complete manifesto, so it might be too soon to tell. But I think I would advise them to not, you know, minimise people's concerns in that way.
Since Rishi Sunak set his own five goals, which are becoming own goals at the moment.
Which you can very well fail on. I completely recognise that.
But, yeah. 3 of them on the economy. He said reduce debt. Well, actually now it's more than double in cash than it was under Labour. and it's 100% of GDP.
That's all
First
the
time
pandemic,
since 1961. It was going up before. It was going up
Yeah,
before
but
then.
the majority of the increase was taken out in the period of the pandemic.
It was going up before then. Growth. Well, there's a report out today, National Institute of Economic and Social Research, kind of very cautious think tank. 5 wasted years. Brexit, the pandemic, and Putin have put paid to economic growth. The economy is essentially flatlining. Bring down inflation, well, it's come down to 7.9. He might hit that because he said halve it by the end of the year, and it was just over 10%. He might hit that, but NHS, cut waiting list, they've gone up. They're now a record, is it 7.5 million, I think? And then stop the boats, he said. Well, you can't stop the boats. I think he lied to people when he said he was going to stop the boats, and he foolish to do so. You can try and reduce them and deal with them, which he's failing to do at the moment. So you look at those 5 goals. I'm not sure they are people's priorities because people want to see that. People want to see their living standards
I don't think
go up. People want public services to be better, particularly the NHS. And they also want to feel safer. When you have crimes, and you only have 1 in 25 crimes results in a conviction. 24 out of 25 crimes, it's 5.4, so it's slightly lower, do not result in a conviction.
No, but you've just made my point. That's exactly what I said. People's concerns are the economy, cost of living, and law and order. If you ask me who is gravitating more on the bullseye, I would say at the moment the Tories are. But that's not saying very much because we don't have much to go on the Labour side. That's my point.
It's Labour polls ahead of the Tories even on migration now because Sunak somehow just said, I'm going to stop the boat. It's not that easy. You've got to stop them sailing. If you're going to do that, you've got to cooperate with other countries and have agreements. That's how you'll really do it. And I think Labour's in a better position to do that than Sunak.
Do you think Labour are on the money with their 5 missions? I mean, Esther just mentioned that they seem a bit more vague as saying breaking down the barriers to opportunity at every stage, building an NHS.
People see that opportunity thing.
What does that mean? Like, how does that happen?
Woke stuff. And I know it's probably not that, but that's what they see.
As broad areas, I think they're right. But can you sell those on the doorstep? No.
And if you haven't got a plan in place
what do you mean?
Well, they've started producing some policies, like more teachers in schools, a program, a workforce program on the NHS, which actually partly the government's adopted. But Labour's offer at the moment, I think, is very limited. And I think they've got to expand
even on the issue of
and show people in practical ways how you will improve their lives. At the moment, you can quite easily paint the Conservatives are making it worse for people. How will you make it better?
I think, listen, on the issue of the secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, well, what if most of the G7 are also in a recession? Are you the first of a bunch of losers? I mean, these for me, I think people are not getting a glimpse of what they want to see from the Labour Party. They want to feel secure that under a Labour government, their lives will not get unnecessarily harder. When you have this push, for example, for green taxes, for the whole opportunity,
look at the polling.
The polling is a reflection of the Tory party, not the Labour Party.
But it shows you people are prepared to listen to Labour. Now, I think Starmer will be the next Prime Minister. I don't think he'll have a big majority, may not even have a majority, because Labour have the fewest seats since 1935. Yeah. But the very fact you can go from the fewest seats at 2019 since 1935 to the fact you're going to have a leader who's Prime Minister is a remarkable political transformation. And partly, I agree, it's powered by how rubbish the Tories are. Last year, 3 Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, people are still paying the cost of that debacle in terms of higher loans, mortgages, and everything else in the economy. And Sunak, his party is all over the place. It's tainted by sleaze. You can see the number of Tory MPs who are taking second jobs and milking it because they know they're going to lose the general election, so they're feathering their own nests while they can. And people don't like any of that. And if you haven't fixed the problem after 13 years, you're not going to fix it.
I don't think Starmer is the character to secure the kind of wave you're talking about. This is why, they've been talking about bringing Blair back and trying to mimic the Blair effect that he had in the late 1990s.
Let's take some calls on this.
I don't think he's the person.
It's an interesting
Maybe
one.
people
Julie.
just like competence and somebody who
wouldn't
looks honest and trustworthy.
That is not Starmer, in my opinion.
Let's speak to Gilly in Carmarthenshire. Hi there, Gilly.
Hi there.
Hi, which side are you on? Do you think it's time for a Labour government or stick to Conservative?
I think that anybody who's discussing this needs to look at the track record of the Labour-run Welsh government, because unfortunately our economy is suffering as a result of some of their policies. They have deliberately targeted the tourism industry, and that is collapsing with additional taxes. They've just bringing in regulations to change it everywhere, where it's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is to be brought down to 20 mile an hour. As soon as you start looking at what is happening in practice in Wales, including the state of the NHS in Wales, which is in a worse state than that over in England, although the Welsh Government get more funding than goes into the English one, you've got major problems that really just need to be assessed.
And so you think that actually sticking with the Conservatives is something that will help with this, Gilly?
What I think is that you just need to look at the track record and of how they're behaving over in Wales and be very wary about the same happening over in England.
Gilly, thank you so much for your call. Let's go to John in Norfolk. Hi there, John.
Hello there. Well, this will be the first time I'm not going to vote because they say they're going to do this and do that. And all they do is look after themselves. But the majority of them are corrupt.
So you're not going to vote at all?
They built these wind turbines saying the energy bills would be cheaper. But they haven't. They're not cheaper at all. They've all gone up.
John, look,
Yes.
Please vote. Just on the democratic grounds.
I'm not voting.
John,
I'm not voting this time.
No. I'm just asking you or imploring you. If you think a party isn't best for you, well, go for the least worst, whichever one that is. But participate, and then you can have a right to say. Otherwise, you'll just be moaning and groaning and grumbling in the background.
We moan anyway, don't we? Whoever gets in, we moan.
Yeah, well, that's all right. But if you vote and you participate, you have a right to criticise the government, whether you vote for it or not. I think if you just sit on your hands and you can't be bothered to go and vote, I'm sorry, you take yourself out of the game.
Who can I vote for when you don't agree with any of their policies?
Go for the one you least disagree with.
Sorry about.
I mean, it is. Most people. That's how most people vote.
No, it's a hard sell. And John, I completely understand. I mean, I say this, and I'm literally in this industry, but I am an undecided voter. And the reason why I make this point is because I completely understand where John is coming from. Who is the party that will make the difference? This is why my argument is which party will make my life least difficult. And at the moment, we don't have enough information from the Labour Party and from the Conservatives Party. I think.
You'll vote though, Esther, won't you?
I will definitely vote, obviously. I will vote, but I'm not a decided voter. So I would say, John, just say you're an undecided voter and you can get away with that.
And I think probably there are a lot of people that feel similar to John, may decide to vote, may not, but it feels like there's less of a divide in some ways between Labour and Conservative. There are people that are deciding to switch sides. There are people that are undecided because there are actually faults on either side.
But there's also less wiggle room. I mean, is it Ian Duncan Smith? He wrote this piece for The Times that I read, and he said the era of ideology politics is dead, because it's true. The circumstances that this country is facing are so acute that you really can't go one way or another. You don't have the luxury of being a Corbynite in this current climate, because there are loads of things that we need to address: inflation, the national debt, looming unemployment, housing prices, the interest rates, all of these things.
But these are all big political issues. Ian Duncan Smith is arguing that because he's now on the side that seemed to be failing on the right. Now, Brexit was hugely ideological. He was a big voice in that. The Labour manifesto in 2017, I think was really radical and transformative. I wish Starmer was pushing that. I think there were problems with Corbyn himself, but I think the programme was very good in terms of extending public ownership and really being on the side of people. But it matters. Now, the gap might narrow in this election, but it's where people live their lives. It still matters whether you're going to get extra teachers for your school, whether your waiting list is going to be reduced, whether you're going to have more money in your pocket. Those things matter. Maybe not to Ian Duncan Smith. He's got some very lucrative outside jobs. He married an heiress, so maybe it doesn't matter to him.
But I think the point he was making was that it's harder for political parties now to differentiate themselves. It wasn't just about, he's trying to pick a side. He's saying it's very difficult for parties now to actually stand out on a particular issue.
Let's take another call on this.
If the 2017 election had gone on a week longer, Labour would have won.
Let's speak to Christopher in Paris. Hi there, Christopher.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for joining us. What do you think about this?
Well, I don't believe that Labour will do a better job than the Conservatives. I believe that they will do different things, but they will do mistakes, as like the governments have done. And the situation that we're in at the moment, i.e. the debt that we have, and also because of Brexit and certain things that haven't been done, that's not because of the fault of the government. That's because of the situations that we're in, i.e. the war in Ukraine, that has took a big hit. Before that, it was the pandemic. Everyone doesn't like the government because of Partygate, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss. I fully understand that, and I'm not voting for Conservative this time around, but I'm not voting Labour because I don't believe they will do a good job neither. I'm going for Liberal Democrat.
Christopher,
That's interesting.
thank you very much for your call. And